my name is Noor Abdulla Hamood, and I work at the organization AQ Digital Solutions based in the UK. AQ Digital Solutions is an organization based in the UK that is dedicated to designing and building bespoke software solutions to organizations of different sizes and industries. They go from building standalone programs all the way to large web-based programs. And recently, a new client came to us named North Sussex Judo. North Sussex Judo is a company based in Sussex, UK, dedicated to providing judo training to people of different ages and experiences. And recently, they have been interested in building a new program that will calculate their athletes' monthly training fees. In this program, they wanted to out-input the name, itemize the cost, the competitions, the private coaching hours, the current weight, and the competition weight. Afterwards, I wanted to output the athlete's name, what their itemized cost is, and what's their total costs, and their current weight, and how it compares to their competition weight. They also wanted us to add additional information to the program, such as the fact that an athlete cannot do more than 5 private coaching hours, and also an athlete cannot do more than 1 competition. Recently, before I was to work on this project, my manager asked me to create a presentation based on the different programming paradigms and on my IDE in order to demonstrate my brief knowledge to the development team. Here's the agenda, what shall be discussed. Moving on to the first topic, let's discuss our chosen IDE PyScripter. Now I know what you're thinking, what is PyScripter? PyScripter is a Python-focused integrated development environment, which means it uses and provides tools for users to debug, execute, and create Python codes, and it is a Windows exclusive, meaning that if you try to use it on a different program like macOS, TempleOS, or Linux, it would not work. Also, it is free, which means that if you want to try out this program after this presentation, you are able to try it for little to no money. And it is a lightweight, meaning it doesn't take up much storage compared to other programs. Now, what does PyScripter do? PyScripter provides many functions and tools for programmers to use, such as syntax highlighting, which uses color to differentiate code, and it uses code folding. Code folding allows the user to hide parts of the code in order to avoid complexity, and lastly uses version control. Version control stores previous versions of a program in order to make it so that in case you want to add and test new features, we can always revert back to how the program used to look. Now let's discuss. What is the general discussion of the 3 coding paradigms and how were their characteristics implemented in my code? Let's move on to our first one, procedural programming. Procedural programming instructs the device on how it should work using logical steps. This has many steps that differentiate it from other programming paradigms, such as using a top-to-bottom approach. This means it reads the user's input and it reads what the user. And then it will use these inputs to make an output, and also uses parameter passing. This means it puts the passing input parameters into a module, and also it has the key feature of adding modularity. This means that similar parts of the program are grouped together in order to avoid complexities in the code. Moving on, let's discuss object-oriented programming, or OOP. Object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm that centers the program around real-world objects. This has many functions that differentiate it from other programming paradigms of its similar type, such as encapsulation. Encapsulation combines code into a single unit, and inheritance. This means that information from previous classes are combined into one class. And also abstraction. This means it hides the relevant data so that the code is less complicated than other programs. Moving on, let's discuss event-driven programming. Event-driven programming is a type of programming that responds to user events or messages. The greatest example is of a coffee machine. When a user he wants hot chocolate, he will touch a button, which will make the program output a hot chocolate. This has many functions as well, such as the use of events. It responds to the user's actions. So if the program was to notice the user making an input like a button click, it would use this to make an output, and it uses loops. It never sleeps nor eats. it constantly checks for events that could occur, and once it gets those events, it does a callback, which means it remembers what behavior should be done with that event. Moving on, here is a comparison of how these three functions may compare to each other. As you can see, the object-oriented assigns classes and inheritance to objects in the program, while the procedural is used to kind of add a top-to-bottom approach, and the event-driven responds to user inputs to trigger events in the program. Now let's move on. Let's have a comparison of how the three paradigms will be used in the given application source code. Object-oriented, in my opinion, will not be the biggest impact on my program. Object-oriented will help me assign classes and inheritance to most variables. And this is essential because this means that the variables have inheritance. The variables have values that they can use, and this means that they have an impact on the final result. So that means that the program, in case it wants to do something, so that means that when we make the final computation, the objects will have a result on that computation. Moving on, event-driven. Event-driven will be the most, I think event-driven is the programming paradigm that will be the most beneficial because it triggers events in the program. It does this by reading the user's inputs, and after reading them, if the user was to make an error, it will display an error message suitably, telling the user what was the error they had committed and how they can, and gives the user a second go so that the error is not the end of the world. Now let's discuss a comparison of how the three programming paradigms have been used in the given application source code. Procedural, in my opinion, will be the most used as will provide a top-to-bottom reading for my programming, meaning that each step, all the way from the input to the output, will be analyzed and then used to be outputted. Also for the event-driven will trigger the events in my program. This means I will read the inputs that my program generates, and it will use these to and it will respond to any user inputs, which will help produce an accurate computation. As the events triggered for what the user inputs will create what will be computed. So if the user wants 5 private coaching hours and he has a beginner training plan, it will take this information and produce it. And now let's move on to procedural. Procedural uses a top-to-bottom approach once more. This means it will read the top of my program, analyze it all the way to the bottom, and it produces the dialog boxes. If we need to know information from our users, the procedural programming will output the dialog box. It will ask our users, what is your name? And then afterwards, our user will input his name, and it will output his name. And also, it can be used to solve bugs. It can be used to solve a bug it can be used to solve errors of the program in which it won't output the dialog box after an error was made. This is a common problem with programming that after using the procedural programming I was able to fix. Now let's move on to object-oriented. Object-oriented will help assign classes and inheritance to each variable. This means that the program does not have to repeat code or use repetition, as it already knows the previous classes and inheritance and what shall be done with it. And also it assigns the values to constants and variables. And the values, they're very beneficial, as when we assign values to constants and variables, we are able to develop a accurate output, as the objects have a variable that helps it differentiate it. So 220 will have a value and 119 will have a value, for example. To conclude this, in conclusion, throughout the development of the North Sussex Judo project presentation, I learned many valuable information about programming paradigms and about my IDE. This presentation had taught me many key concepts which I can apply in future programs, such as the use of programming paradigms and the use of integrated development environments, and also how we can make these based on stakeholder requirements. I hope that everybody watching this presentation learned as well as I did, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.